is important to work collectively with other nations to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic, says Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. 15th COVID-19 death in the country reported. Quarantine curfew imposed in Kothatuwa and Mulleriyawa police jurisdictions. Beijing says Washington acting with Cold War mentality after a US official urges Sri Lanka to make difficult but necessary choices. Are there enough hospitals to treat COVID-19 patients?
මේ රෝගීන් එන සංඛ්‍යාව මහා පරිමාණයෙන් ආවොත් කොහොමද කරන්න කියන එකට සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශය වැඩපිළිවෙලක් යොදලා තියෙනවා.
Opposition leader visits the Abhayaramaya Viharaya. Former President Maithripala Sirisena says he does not accept the report of the Parliamentary Select Committee that investigated last year's April 21st attacks.
A very good evening and a warm welcome to your weekend edition of Primetime News on TV1. On to your lead story tonight, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has reiterated Sri Lanka's commitment to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. The Prime Minister made these remarks during a virtual event held to mark the UN's 75th anniversary yesterday. The United Nations office in Sri Lanka had organized a virtual panel discussion to mark its 75th anniversary.
I want to start by thanking the United Nations for its support to Sri Lanka in fighting the coronavirus outbreak. As the world takes on the challenges of this unprecedented global health crisis, it is more important than ever to work collectively on our shared challenges to overcome this pandemic. As member states, I believe we need to support the United Nations as it evolves into more agile and accountable institution. The world is changing dramatically, and an upgraded United Nations must both adapt and stay relevant. We are firm in our commitment to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 and create a greener and more sustainable environment for the future. I call upon my fellow world leaders to work collectively in restoring compassion back to this ecosystem in our respective countries. One of my most important memories working with the UN is when I had the opportunity to work with the children, especially after Easter Sunday attacks and during the pandemic. In addition to remaining committed to children's right and safety, I remain equally committed to addressing the challenges faced by women and girls, the elderly and the differently abled, and look forward to working closely with the UN Residence Coordinator and the country team.
Another 201 COVID-19 patients were reported today. The Ministry of Health said 140 of them were close contacts of the patients of the Paliagoda cluster, 37 were from quarantine centres and 24 from the fisheries harbours. Accordingly, the number of COVID-19 cases reported from the country increased to 7,324, of which 3,714 have been discharged from hospitals after receiving medical treatment. Sri Lanka recorded its 15th casualty due to COVID-19 today. The deceased was a 52-year-old resident of Kuliyapitiya. The COVID-19 death reported today was of a man who had been admitted to the Kuliyapitiya Teaching Hospital following a heart attack on the 14th of this month. He had been receiving treatment at ward number 16 of the hospital.
The man was 56 years old. He was a patient who had been admitted to the hospital on the 14th after experiencing a heart attack. We provided preliminary treatment to the patient. Since his condition worsened on the 15th, we transferred him to the ICU. We admitted another patient to the ICU on that day. Since that patient could contract COVID-19, we conducted PCR tests on both of them. The patient who was admitted later on that day tested positive for the virus, while the man tested negative. The COVID-19 patient was then transferred to the infectious disease hospital. It was that patient who died as the 14th COVID patient. In the meantime, we always considered the patient at the ICU as a suspected COVID-19 patient. We conducted the third PCR test on him last evening. We then learned that he had contracted the virus. Since he showed signs of recovery, we transferred him to the isolation ward. However, once his condition began to worsen, he was transferred to the ICU again. He passed away this morning.
The final rites of the deceased were carried out at the Kulia Cemetery this afternoon. This was done upon the advice of the Medical Officer of Health in the area. A quarantine curfew was imposed with effect from 7 p.m. in the Gotatua and Mulleriava police jurisdictions today.
Decision has been taken to impose quarantine curfew in the police areas of Gotatua and Mulleriava, in addition to the 49 police areas where the curfew was imposed earlier. Therefore, we would like to make a request from the general public that everyone should adhere with quarantine rules and regulation. We are going to deploy additional police strength in the areas where the quarantine curfew has been imposed, and specific instructions have been given to police officers to detect all the lawbreakers.
51 police jurisdictions in the country are currently under quarantine curfew. The curfew that was imposed in the Dematagoda and Maradana police jurisdictions in the Colombo district last evening will remain until further notice, while the curfew in the Payagala, Beruwala and Alutkama police jurisdictions in the Kaluthara district will remain until 5 a.m. on Monday. 10 other police jurisdictions in the Colombo district, the Gampaha district, 5 police jurisdictions in the Kurunegala district and 3 police jurisdictions in the Kaluthara district are also under quarantine curfew. Public movement was witnessed in several areas that are under curfew as candidates sat for the common general test of the GCE advanced level examination today. Police intervened to control public activity that was witnessed in the vicinity of advanced level examination centers in areas that are under curfew in Kuliapitia. The situation in the Colombo district. Most of the recent COVID-19 cases were identified from Colombo and its surrounding areas. PCR tests were performed at the Muadora Oena housing complex on individuals believed to be associates of COVID-19 patients belonging to the cluster at the Paliagoda fish market. The Nugegoda public market was closed until further notice after 2 traders who sold fish that was purchased from the Paliagoda fish market had tested positive for COVID-19 today.
After conducting random PCR tests and receiving those results, we will restore normalcy in the area. We disinfected the premises to destroy the germs.
The situation in the Gampaha district. PCR tests were carried out at the Gampaha Municipal Council grounds on individuals who had visited the Paliagoda fish market today. According to the Municipal Council, 200 individuals have been subjected to PCR tests. The public health inspectors attached to the Gampaha Municipal Council said that 150 PCR tests had been carried out yesterday. Meanwhile, a special discussion was held at the Gampaha District Secretariat on the current situation in the area and to determine the future course of action. The meeting was chaired by District Secretary Sunil Jailath. Sri Lanka recorded its highest single-day tally of COVID-19 infections yesterday, with the figure standing at 866. 535 patients among yesterday's cases had contracted the virus at the Paliagoda fish market. Meanwhile, 79 patients were identified from Mattakulya yesterday, while 63 had been identified from Kotahena and 54 from Paliagoda. Official data showed that COVID-19 patients linked to the cluster at the Paliagoda fish market were identified from 68 areas in the country yesterday. 5 patients from the Ratgama, Boosa, Magulla and Makuluvava areas have been identified as those who contracted the virus at the Gaul Fisheries Harbour. 20 patients from the Kaluthara, Beruwala, Bentota, Ratgama, Manhena, Alutgama, Balipanna and Panadura areas were identified as those who were infected at the Beruwala Fisheries Harbour. Further, 140 patients were identified from Colombo, while 87 patients were identified from the Gampaha district.
Has the transmission of COVID-19 increased geographically?
මේක භූගෝලීය වශයෙන්
The virus has geographically spread to different parts of the country. A majority of those who have been infected with the virus have visited populous localities and cities, which led to an increase in COVID-19 cases. We now have to carry out tests on a larger population because of this. The increase in numbers has increased the burden on the health sector.
බරක් වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා.
Why is Sri Lanka not under lockdown?
මේ සීමාවන් අනිවාර්යෙන් පැනෙව්වොත් මෙහිදී ඊටාත්ම සමාජ
If we impose lockdown restrictions island-wide, many will be affected economically and socially, especially the poor and vulnerable communities. This is why we impose quarantine curfew in selected areas. However, we need the support of the public, and if we don't receive it accordingly, we will have no other option than to impose travel restrictions.
සීමාවන් වලට යාමට සිද්ධ වේවි.
Do we have enough hospitals?
අපිට මීට වඩා වැඩි වේගයකින් මේ රෝගී
If the number of patients increases at a higher rate, we might have to direct the general public to other centers that have been transformed into hospitals so they could obtain the medical services we provide on a daily basis without any interruption. This plan is currently underway. However, this program will only come into play if the number of COVID-19 cases increases further.
සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ වැඩි වැඩියෙන් රෝගීන්.
The head of the World Health Organization said that the world is now at a critical juncture in the COVID-19 pandemic.
The next few months are going to be very tough, and some countries are on a dangerous track. Too many countries are seeing an exponential increase in cases, and that's now leading to hospitals and ICU running close or above capacity, and we're still only in October. We urge leaders to take immediate action to prevent further unnecessary deaths, essential health services from collapsing, and schools shutting again. As I said it in February, and I'm repeating it today, this is not a drill.
During a media briefing in Galle today, the All-Island Fisheries Association expressed the following views on the problems faced by their industry.
At present, tons of fish have been piled up in refrigerators and boats. Fishermen in Galle said approximately 200,000 kilograms of fish has been piled up on boats and inside refrigerators. What are we to do now? All of this will go to waste. This will cause a major issue. This is the same situation at the Paliagodi Fish Market and the Beruwala Fisheries Harbour. We urge the Department of Fisheries to intervene into this matter and to provide us with facilities to store the stocks of fish.
Meanwhile, Health Minister Pavitra Vanniyarachchi has instructed officials to prepare the necessary guidelines required for the operation of fisheries harbours to sustain the industry amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. 32 multi-day fishing trawlers have been docked at the Beruwala Fisheries Harbour that has been closed off, while 21 multi-day fishing trawlers with 350,000 kilograms of fish has been docked at the Galle Fisheries Harbour. According to the Health Ministry, a decision was made during a meeting to ensure that the catch remaining on these boats is given to the consumers by abiding to health guidelines.
Amidst the COVID-19 pandemic in the country, army personnel continue to render a great service to the quarantine process taking place in Sri Lanka. Now, these were some of the visuals obtained at the quarantine centre in the Pashtun Ratha National College of Education that is maintained by the Pelavatta Army Camp. Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa called on Venerable Muruthettuwe Anandathero at the Abhayarama temple today. The chief priest of the temple was informed about the development of temples and Dhamma schools that are expected to take place under the Swarita, Vyaparaya and Sasunata Aruna programs.
We are doing this on behalf of the people. There is a need for public welfare. The people are exercising their sovereignty. If the needs and wants of the people are met, they will not take to the streets. That is why the people often recall the services rendered by former President Premadasa. The advice I am giving you is to follow your father's footsteps. Politicians are defecting to and from their camps like frogs. The monks are also doing the same thing today. The policies that are implemented today are not stable and have ulterior motives. We have to eradicate both those problems when working.
දෙකම තුරන් කරන්න වෙලා තියෙනවා අපිට මේ වැඩ කරනකොට.
අවස්ථාවකදීවත් අපි පක්ෂ නැහැ. ජනාධිපති බලය මොට කරන්නට, අගමැති බලය මොට කරන්නට.
We are not willing to tamper with the powers of the President or the Prime Minister under any circumstances. I firmly believe that the President and the Prime Minister are two important units. The individuals who serve in these positions, their background or their party is not important. Both of them must be given powers. However, our new vision is to see the introduction of a new constitution that will contribute to serving the country instead of producing dictators.
With the passing of the 20th Amendment, everyone's focus is now on a new constitution. Expressing his views on this, Minister of Justice, President's Counsel Ali Sabry joined Charlene Benedict on our Newsline segment today.
Minister of Justice, President's Counsel Ali Sabry. Yesterday, the day before, the 20th Amendment to the Constitution was quite easily passed in Parliament, I would say. But people in this country want a new Constitution. Will this new Constitution see the light of day?
We are determined that it sees light end of the day. We have appointed an expert committee. Expert committee had already started their sittings at BMICA. There is a separate secretariat established for that. So they have even called for public opinion.
Do you honestly believe that people in this country amid this pandemic can really send in their proposals within just over a month?
Actually, this constitution and the new constitutional debate have been there for a long period of time. So a lot of people who are interested, not that everybody in the street will send those. So people who are interested really on that, I think they have already have some sort of their opinions there. So 1 month is enough or not, I don't know, I can't say for sure. It's a decision which has been taken by the expert committee. There are some areas which we are very keen, like changing the electoral system and making the judiciary strengthened, then public service independent. Those things while delivering.
Something that caused much debate in the country was this provision to allow dual citizens to hold public office. Now there has been broad debate, but yesterday it was overwhelmingly passed in Parliament. There was actually one extra vote from the opposition for the passage of this specific clause, but the President has promised to remove this in the new Constitution. Is that a guarantee?
Yeah, he in fact spoke to me and told that in the discussions they had that he had given that promise in the new Constitution. Dual citizens' ability to be in the Parliament will be removed.
The division of powers and electoral system, how do we accommodate minority communities in the Parliament, has been an ongoing debate since the beginning of our Republic. How do you plan on tackling this?
Centre can't have all the powers with them. Centre has to devolve. But what is the unit of the devolution? I think there is absolute agreement amongst all parties that power has to be devolved from centre to the periphery.
So currently speaking, from this standpoint, does power have to be devolved more, or does more power have to be centralized?
So I think basically what we are looking at is certain areas. For example, I wouldn't agree for a small country like Sri Lanka, you devolve in the police powers to someone.
Right.
And the land powers.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that people in that particular area shouldn't have access to their particular land. So these are debates, but the unit of devolution we need to carefully plan out of it.
Speaking specifically about strengthening the judiciary, there has been a lot of talk in Sri Lanka, the lack of post-enactment judicial review. Will the government be looking at introducing this change that has been adopted by many other flourishing democracies in the country in the new constitution?
That's one of the areas, if you ask me, I am a very keen believer on that. But there is this fear of abuse of power. So then, for example, if you bring a new law, it could be indefinitely challenged after a long period of time.
Right.
What happens, everything what you did during that particular period of time, so it cannot be haphazardly brought in to think about it, but at least for a very short period of time, just to curtail the manipulations during the committee stage. Right. We should bring something in. I agree with you.
Justice delayed is justice denied. The current government has taken steps to rectify this matter by increasing the number of Supreme Court justices as well as Court of Appeal justices in the 20th Amendment. However, on the flip side, the opposition's argument is that this was done haphazardly during the committee stage. Why weren't these changes that were included in the 20th Amendment to the Constitution in the committee stage brought in the draft bill?
Yeah, if you look at it, what we actually did on the bill, we were just looking at the 18th Amendment and the 19th Amendment. We were going back on the 19th Amendment. Right. That's what we did. So we didn't look at anything else on that. So thereafter, there were public debate and discussions on that. That's how I submitted my committee stage amendment, some other committee stage amendment. Even thereafter, there were discussion. That's how we limited 30, the cabinet to the 30, and then the urgent bill only for disaster management and public security. And there are several of those things we discussed on that. 3 members of the parliament had specifically proposed that loss delays is a massive problem. You need to address that, and this is not deviating from the principles of the bill what we submitted, because one of the issue was also appointing the judges and their promotion. So accordingly, we thought this is in good spirit. This is to address the loss delays, and we must make use of this opportunity, because we can't wait till a new constitution comes to do this.
The allegation on the part of the opposition is the fact that the government is now looking to pack the court with judges more inclined towards the government?
No, I don't think they will do. The president is not interested at all. Just look at the appointment what we have made during the last year or so of the presidency. It's all, I mean, you don't just appoint people like that. There has to be a balance. So generally we get the CJ's recommendation, the AG's recommendations, Justice Minister's recommendation. Thereafter, it will be sent to the Parliamentary Council for their observation. So you can, don't presume. I ask the opposition not to presume wrongdoing all the time. Presume the right thing. That is, we have all done this in good spirit.
President's Counsel Ali Sabry, we wish you the best of luck for all your future endeavors in the creation of a better country for us all.
For the full interview, watch The Role of Law on Thursday, the 29th of October at 7 p.m. on TV1 and streaming live on the Newsfirst YouTube channel. Taking a look at more local news, opposition leader Sajith Premadasa arrived at the Presidential Commission probing incidents of political victimization for the first time today.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa arrived at the Presidential Commission probing incidents of political victimization over a complaint filed by the Director General of the Divineguma Department, Bandula Tilakasiri. When I served as the Samurdhi Minister, we made an administrative decision. This decision was implemented after obtaining approval. It was decided that further evidence was not required from me over this complaint. I have not been involved in any irregularity.
Today marks the 26th death anniversary of the late prominent politician Gamini Dissanayake. A commemoration ceremony was held opposite the late politician's statue in Colombo today.
Former Speaker Karujaya Surya, Navin Dissanayake, Mayanti Dissanayake and several other family members paid floral tributes to the statue of the late politician.
We
remember him with much respect because he was a leader who rendered a great service to our country. The people of this country still love and respect him. He was a leader who rendered a great service during a short period of time.
This is a brief profile of the late Gamini Dissanayake.
Disanayaka Mudiyanse Ralahamilage Lionel Gamini Disanayaka was born on the 20th of March 1942 as the second son to parents Andrew Disanayaka and Samarthunga Velagedara. He completed his education at Trinity College in Kandy. He then entered the Ceylon Law College. In 1988, Gamini Disanayaka took silk as the President's Counsel. Disanayaka entered Parliament at the age of 28 for the first time in 1970 after his victory at the general election from the Nuwareli electorate under the United National Party ticket. He was appointed as the Minister of Power, Irrigation and Mahaveli Development in 1977 and went on to spearhead the Mahaveli Development Project, making history in the country. His leadership saw the construction of the Kotmale, Victoria, Randenigala, Rantambe, Madruoya and Ulhiti reservoirs and also the Iginimitia and Lunugambhera reservoirs that were constructed well ahead of the estimated duration.
අපි විශාල පරිත්‍යාගයක් කරනවා. මගේ පියාගේ මුල් ගෙදර යට වෙනවා මේ ජලාශයට. මගේ මව්ගේ ගෙදරත් යට වෙනවා. නමුත් අපි ඒක වරප්‍රසාදයක් හැටියට සලකනවා. මේ රට වෙනුවෙන් ඒ පරිත්‍යාග කරන්න.
The Swarnabhumi project that saw land title deeds being granted to the people of this country was the brainchild of Disanayaka. Disanayaka, who held the post of chairman at Sri Lanka Cricket, twice played a vital role in helping the country gain Test cricket status in 1982. The construction of the Sri Lanka Cricket head office at the premises of the Sinhalese Sports Club in Colombo and also the cricketing headquarters at Maitland Place were significant events that took place under his tenure. It was Gamini Disanayaka who rendered a yeoman's service in upgrading the Askiriya Stadium in Kandy into an international cricket stadium. Disanayaka, who fought vigorously to abolish the executive presidency, was assassinated by a suicide bomber on the 24th of October in 1994 while running for the presidential election that year. He was 52 years old at the time of his demise. Gamini Disanayaka was a proud father of Naveen, Mayantha and Varuni and also the loving husband of Shrima Disanayaka. The memories of Gamini Disanayaka, who served as a leader with a powerful vision, will remain etched to the hearts of the people despite his tragic departure that shook the hearts of many.
On to a headline-making story. Former President Maithripala Sirisena has said that he does not accept the report of the Parliamentary Select Committee that investigated last year's April 21st attacks. He made these remarks while giving evidence at the Presidential Commission probing the attacks today.
President's Counsel Shamil Pereira, who appeared for Colombo Archbishop Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit, cross-questioned the former president for the second time today. Responding to these questions, the former president said, quote-unquote, "I do not accept the Parliamentary Select Committee. The person who stirred up that problem had severe animosity towards me. The individuals who served in that committee also had the same attitude. Therefore, I do not accept the conduct of the Parliamentary Select Committee. If the committee has made any recommendations about me, I am not willing to accept that." The former president also denied that he was informed about the intelligence warnings of the attack during telephone conversations between him and the director of the State Intelligence Service between the 1st and the 21st of April last year.
Sri Lanka's geopolitics.
China says the United States is bullying other countries to pick sides over their ties to Beijing. These remarks were made after a senior Washington official called on Sri Lanka to make difficult but necessary choices.
The US officials' remarks are brimming with Cold War mentality and hegemony, which fully expose their usual practice of interfering in other countries' internal affairs by bullying small and medium-sized countries into picking sides. China believes that all countries, big or small, have the right to independently develop their foreign relations based on their own interests. Any attempt to use pressure or coerce to obstruct normal cooperation and exchanges between countries will not succeed. In the end, they will become the scorn of history, the laughing stock of the international community.
必将遭到历史的唾弃，沦为
US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will visit Sri Lanka next week as part of a trip that includes India, Maldives and Indonesia. Members of US State Secretary Mike Pompeo's staff arrived in the country yesterday in the morning and in the evening to prepare for his visit. In a telephonic briefing with reporters, Dean Thompson, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary at US State Department's Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs, warned the Sri Lankan government about whom they team up with for their economic partnerships. He said, quote, "We encourage Sri Lanka to review the options we offer for transparent and sustainable economic development in contrast to discriminatory and opaque practices," end quote. Sri Lanka's government bonds fell heavily yesterday after the United States urged Sri Lanka to make difficult but necessary choices regarding its ties with China. According to Reuters, Sri Lanka's 2021 and 2022 dollar-denominated bonds dropped more than 5%, while 2025 and 2026 bonds dropped below the 60% on the dollar threshold. According to global analysts, doubts over Sri Lanka's ability to repay its external debt due to the COVID-19 crisis have already seen its bonds slump over 40% this year.
Let me bring out an example to show the support of our country towards the US due to its power. We saw that a US aircraft arrived in the country. It was not an ordinary aircraft that landed at the Bandaranaike International Airport, but one that belonged to the US military. The government must now explain why the aircraft landed at our airport. Earlier, there were political groups who used to make a huge hue and cry against the US. Where are these fake patriots now? When individuals like Vimal Veerawansa were in the opposition, they used to hurl accusations against the good governance government even at the sight of a US vessel. The group that claimed that the US is attempting to use Sri Lanka as a military base is now shamefully conducting themselves to display the strength of the 20th Amendment. They are bringing shame to the 6.9 million people who voted for them.
This is ours. Sri Lanka's exclusive economic zone. $517,000 square kilometers of beautiful open ocean. Our greatest resource. 8 times our landmass. This is the Sea of Sri Lanka.
And that's the wrap of Primetime News. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Zeenat Musafir, along with tonight's news interpreter Tarika Gabriel. Thank you very much for watching Newsfirst. Good night and take care.